And welcome. All right. The SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice of the University of San Francisco acknowledges our presence on the unceded land of the indigenous Ohlone communities and pays our respect to these traditional caretakers and elders, past, present, and emerging. It's our intention that this acknowledgement plays a role, however infinitesimal, in a much larger process of confronting the past in order to create a not yet realized future rooted in justice. Welcome everyone to the University of San Francisco SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice inaugural Alvin H. Baum Jr. Memorial Lecture, where in memory and honor of Al Baum and Cheryl Lazar, from today forward we will annually honor an LGBTQ+ Jewish social justice activist. My name is Aaron Hahn Tapper, and it's my honor and privilege to direct the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, who are tonight putting on this event. Before introducing Rabbi Camille Angel, the chief MC of tonight, let me tell you a little bit about the University of San Francisco, USF, as well as our extraordinary Jewish Studies and Social Justice program. Founded in 1885, USF is the city of San Francisco's first university. A premier Jesuit Catholic school, in 1977, we became the first Catholic institution in the world to establish a Jewish Studies program. Some 30 years later, in 2008, we became the first university of any kind, Catholic or otherwise, to have an academic program formally linking Jewish studies with social justice. And in 2019, we added yet another first to our renowned history by forming a new position on campus, Rabbi in Residence. With the hiring of Rabbi Camille Shira Angel, we became the first Catholic school with a queer rabbi in residence in history. Through the SWIG JSSJ program, we believe that education is the best long-term way to create systemic change. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or a mere few hours to hear from a single speaker, education is fundamental to making our world better, paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity. USF is a remarkable place. Our tagline, "Change the world from here," is the real deal. With 10,000 undergraduate and graduate students, US News and World Report notes that we are the #1 most diverse campus in terms of race and ethnicity in the country. An educational institution where 1/3 of our undergraduates are the first in their families to attend college. We estimate that 10% of our student body, grads and undergrads, identify as Jewish, and arguably more than 20% identify as queer. Having such robust populations of Jews and queer-identified students on campus would certainly be enough to make Rabbi Angel a good match for us. But she cannot be understood as a queer rabbi alone. She supports not just Jews on their Jewish journeys or queer folk on their queer journeys. She's a beacon of encouragement, hope, and love for anyone of any background, student, staff, faculty. She embodies interfaith, she embodies multi-faith as an ethos. She personifies a dedication to treating people as if each and every one of us is created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, a sacred idea found in the book of Genesis. Yes, it's important to tell you that she received her rabbinic degree from the Hebrew Union College, and after serving for a number of years in a congregation in Manhattan, she moved to San Francisco to become the spiritual leader of Congregation Shar Zahav for 15 years, a queer flagship synagogue located not far from here. And yes, you should know that she teaches 2 of the most popular courses on campus, Queering Religion and Honoring Our LGBTQIA+ Elders. But perhaps most important for you to know is that Rabbi Angel is a blessing. And we at USF And we at USF, there'll be time to clap in one moment. And we at USF, especially we who work together with her for the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, are lucky beyond words to be in her presence. Please welcome Rabbi Angel to the podium.
Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural Alvin H. Baum Jr. Memorial Lecture, honoring lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex Jewish social justice activism. To those of you here in the room and to those of you joining us virtually on the live stream, we are so glad you made the event this evening your priority. The Academy Award for Best Audience goes to you. This is the first in a series of 5 lectures made possible by the family and friends of Al Baum as a celebration of Al's life and his contributions to pursuing justice and equality for LGBTQI people. It's a Jewish custom that at the 1-year anniversary of a dear one's death, you study something relevant to that person. Tomorrow marks the 1-year anniversary of Al's death. Al was warm-hearted, gifted, and a devoted community leader. Well-educated with several degrees, Al had careers as a lawyer, an urban planner, a social worker, and a therapist. He was instrumental in founding the New Israel Fund, the Gay and Lesbian Task Force of the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, and he served on countless boards and committees, including the American Civil Liberties Union and the Lambda Legal Defense Education Fund. In 2013, he was honored as the Lifetime Achievement Grand Marshal of the 43rd Annual San Francisco Pride Parade. Not only did he do good deeds in abundance, but Al also motivated others to follow in suit. Al became my friend over 20 years ago. It was a joy to see him make a life with his husband, Robert Holgate. I had the honor of officiating at their wedding, one of the happiest days in Al's life. I also had the sacred privilege of helping Al reach his final days on this earth. The many community members who are joining us this evening, in person and by live stream, are here because of their abiding affection for Al. May Al's memory be a blessing and an inspiration now and always. Al was born in Chicago in 1930. The world in which he grew up was very different than today. People and institutions were unkind to gays and lesbians and gender nonconformants, to put it mildly. In fact, Al remained closeted and conflicted well into his adulthood, and it was only in his 50s that he began to live an integrated life as an out and proud gay man. Once he was out, he made up for the lost years by seeing to it that others would have an easier time and by making sure that boardrooms and committees in the Jewish community were welcoming places for LGBTQ people to be of service and hold leadership positions. He was often the first gay person to participate in various groups, but saw to it that he wouldn't be the last. As a young lesbian rabbi, I met Al in 2000 when I became the spiritual leader of the flagship LGBTQ synagogue here in San Francisco, Congregation Sha'ar Zahav. I didn't meet him at prayer services. He would be the first to tell you that he wasn't a religiously observant sort of Jew. Rather, I met him as the most generous philanthropist to causes near and dear to our community. In a moment, I'm going to share with you a 4-minute video from a much longer interview taken by Mason Funk, who's here with us tonight, of the Outwards Project. And you'll get to meet Al yourself. But before that, let me take another minute or two to share with you the objective of this lecture series. For most of history, and still in many places, even here in San Francisco, being gay or lesbian, bisexual and transgender, non-binary and gender non-conforming has been deemed unnatural, immoral, and/or criminal. The Abrahamic faith traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are partially to blame. Religious teachers, preachers, and parishioners have cherry-picked scriptural verses to create a false myth of God versus gay. But God versus gay isn't just a false dichotomy. It's a rebellion against the image of God itself. This is among the most pervasive and hurtful untruths in America and around the globe today, and people all across the ideological spectrum continue to believe it. Religious-based hatred for gays and lesbians, transgender and gender nonconforming people is a historic injustice that continues to wreak emotional and spiritual havoc on people of all ages. Having worked in LGBTQ religious communities for more than 2 decades, I've met thousands of people wounded by what they see as a conflict between religion and LGBTQ identity. It's not surprising that many LGBTQ identified people have given up on religion. Actually, so-called religious people gave up on us first. In the classroom, I hear the stories of our students who've been made to feel less than fully human. Young people consider suicide as a means to escape the pain and shame which religious authorities, teachers, parents, texts, dogma, doctrines, governments, politicians, priests, rabbis, and imams spew, preach, legislate, and dictate in order to destroy our lives. Students tell me that if their parents were to find out that they are taking classes that honor LGBTQ elders, their financial support would be taken away. Students during COVID were Zooming in from their literal closets, afraid of being caught listening to our class discussions. When prospective students and families see the rainbow flag in the window of my university ministry office, when queer people see USF marching in the Pride Parade, when we make religious support for LGBTQI people fully visible and explicit, it matters. For some, it's life-affirming, and for others, it's life-saving. I am grateful beyond words to Aaron Hahn Tapper, director of the SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, for making my work at USF possible and enabling me to do my part in countering religious-based homophobia and transphobia. Tonight's program is just one example. Of course, it takes a village to make this repair work real. I want to acknowledge by name a few people. First and foremost, Al's husband, Robert Holgate. You are a good, kind, and generous man. Thank you for your faith in me and your willingness to coach me to stand up to bullies. Thank you for supporting my work as rabbi in residence, and of course for your huge generosity in this evening. Pam, David, you've become a mentor, a lifelong friend, part of my family. Your years of brilliant strategic direction in politics and philanthropy have shaped our country's landscape in countless ways. And your beloved wife of 34 years, Cheryl Lazar, had the very best of you. To the co-hosts, benefactors, and friends, sorry that it's a little blurry. They're all printed in your program, but for those live streaming, I wanted to be sure you knew your names were being seen. More than 80 individuals and organizations, thank you. May you be fruitful and multiply in your efforts to repair this world. Thank you to our JSSJ Assistant Director, Professor Oren Kroll-Zeldin, and the staff at USF, especially Victoria Farlow, the JSSJ Program Assistant. Thank you to Carly Thomas and her development team, and Sam Bethel with Office of Marketing and Communications. The groundwork for tonight's program was laid 20 years ago when the SWIG program in Judaic Studies, as it was then called, hosted the first ever interfaith dialogue with a symposium entitled New Jewish and Christian Approaches to Homosexuality. Our university chaplain, Donald Godfrey, was part of that evening and continues to be an extraordinary shepherd to our flock. Thank you to President Fitzgerald and all of my colleagues at University Ministry, our director, Angelica Quinones, and our former director, Julie Dowd. Thank you for your ongoing allyship to this body of sacred work. Thanks also go to the elders in our community, Jay Cohen, Lisa Scher, Joss Eldridge and Sandra Marilyn, Paul Cohen of blessed memory, Congregation Sha'ar Zahav, Cynthia Kopek, Naomi Engel, and the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, my beloved wife, Wendy Lynn Brummer. And thank you to our students, from whom we learned the most. If there's anyone I unintentionally left out of this long list, I'm sincerely sorry. Thank you all so much. Now, a few words from our sponsor, Baum.
I came out as a gay man in 1975. Before that, I had some girlfriends. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't easy, it didn't fit me, but that's what I did. I thought that's what I had to do. Well, I was very closeted. I would go to the parks and pick up somebody and have sex, but I never told them my name, or if I did, I gave them a fake name. In 1972, Jim Foster was the first out gay man to address the Democratic political convention. That was a turning point in this country. He was a friend of mine, and that changed me. And then I decided I really needed to do something about this, and I started going to therapy. And then I had a friend who was one of a group of 10 men who started something called Lavender University. They were all gay. And I had a friend at that time who was the education reporter for the Chronicle. And I asked him if he would be willing to do an article. He said, of course. So I made a plan to bring 2 of the 10 men to him. And I was going to introduce them and then leave. But what happened was only one of them showed up. And he said, well, Al, stay, don't go. I need some more quotes. And then he said, your quotes are really good. I want to quote you in the article. Would that be all right? And I can remember, they say when you're drowning, your whole life passes before your eyes. Well, it was like that. But I had been telling people, friends, that they should come out. And I said to myself, you have to be willing to do it yourself, or you're just being hypocritical. 2 weeks later, there was a story in the newspaper with a picture of me and a story that made it very plain that I had a personal interest in this Lavender University, and that was it. I smile always still when I use that word, philanthropy, because I refused the label for years and years and years and years. To be honest, long after I had the wherewithal to give more than most people can, I didn't. And I finally got into it because I was shamed into it by a Catholic friend of mine, a gay Catholic friend of mine who was a lawyer, and we became quite close friends. He had the mentality or the philosophy of a priest, which was do for others. Patrick said, you can do it, just do it. There's so many good causes around, and some of them already, but just give a little more. He worked on me and worked on me and worked on me, and gradually, I started giving more. Doing that has become part of my life. Being the age that I am, and having had the health issues that I've had, I've had to think about what happens when I die. You can't take it with you. So I used to say I was a bad Jew. And then people, rabbis and other people would say, you do so much else for the world and for people who don't have. That's true. That is part of the Jewish religion, that tzedakah. And I do that. I admit that. It doesn't feel spiritual to me, but I think in terms of what people mean by the word, perhaps it is.
Yes, Mason Funk, will you stand up because it's your Outwards project that is making these digital archives possible. Before I introduce tonight's esteemed guests, let me explain how the evening will unfold from here. Dr. Adelman will speak until approximately 7:35, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. As you no doubt noticed earlier this evening, a 3x5 card and pencil were placed on each chair here in the Marashi room. For those attendees interested in asking questions, please write your questions on your card and pass them to the aisle. Designated staff and faculty will collect the cards during tonight's conversation, and the cards will be passed to me. Finally, we will hear a few last words from Pam, David, and Robert Holgate. Now, it is my delight to introduce Dr. Marcy Adelman, one of my social justice heroes. Dr. Marcy Adelman has devoted her life's work and resources to our community, to people of all ages, but especially to the elders. Throughout her entire career, she's worked to center the voices and experiences of older LGBTQ adults in all aspects of life, and is a leading advocate for quality LGBTQ elder care and policies that safeguard equal treatment. In April of 1998, Marcy, along with her partner, Jeanette Gurovich of blessed memory, became the co-founder of Openhouse. Openhouse provides housing services, health and wellness programs, information and referral to senior services, opportunities to volunteer, as well as LGBT senior cultural humility training for senior service providers and senior service agencies. An LGBTQI longevity consultant and policy advisor, Marcy is the vice chair of the California Commission on Aging, which serves as the principal advocate in the state on behalf of older individuals. Marcy has been in private practice as a clinical psychologist for over 41 years and 8 months. Marcy is also the founder of the LGBTQ Aging Research Partnership. She sits on many boards as an advisor and expert, including the board of the Alzheimer's Association of Northern California and Northern Nevada, a member of the Advisory Council to San Francisco's Department of Aging and Adult Services, and sits on the board of the Dignity Fund Oversight and Advisory Committee for the City and County of San Francisco. Last year, Marcy was a teaching elder in my Honoring Our LGBTQIA+ Religious Elders Community Engaged Learning course. She was paired with 3 students with whom she met every week for 12 weeks and taught them about LGBTQ history and values. Marcy has been changing lives, helping people of all ages self-actualize and feel at home. She's truly a hero in our community, and as history is told, she'll be remembered for having made this great city a more righteous one. USF's encouragement to change the world from here has no better exemplar than Dr. Marcy Adelman, and we are the better for it. Please join me in welcoming Marcy to USF.
One hell of an introduction. Thank you, Rabbi. So the rabbi said, come give this talk. I said, oh, okay. So you have to know, I usually give talks about 5 minutes long. Raising money. When you raise money at a fundraiser, you get off the stage as quick as you can. So here I am doing a 35-minute talk about my life. Well, okay, I said, I can do that. And in preparation for this talk, more or less, I was an LGBTQ plus elder in the rabbi's class, and one of my students is here. Why don't you stand up? Nayeli. Nayeli's here. So I want to say a little something about the class and the rabbi's work, which, can you hear me? Maybe I don't need to stand so close to that. It was transformational for the students and for me. And I think for the other elders that are here, I see the other elders here and some of the other students. And it was transformational. I suppose each of us has their own story, but for me, I mean, honestly, I never thought about how my Jewish values really influenced my life, not in a very coherent way. And I'm a cultural Jew. I'm not religious. I've never been to Israel. I can count on one hand how many times I've been to a synagogue in the last 30 years. But I'm a Jew, and a proud Jew. And so the class really touched me in a way, reconnected me in a way to my family that I hadn't been connected to in a long time. And the students, if I may speak for you, said that it was transformational as well for them, because it gave them an opportunity to hear about the history of my life and the history of being gay and what that was like, and to relate that to their own community, to do community work in their own communities. And so I just want to thank the rabbi for every day doing the kind of work you do. It's just been huge. Thank you so much. So I want to talk a little bit about Al, of course. I first met Al in 2001 when he attended Openhouse's inaugural event. And Openhouse is a San Francisco nonprofit that I founded with my late partner, Jeanette Gorevich. And I envisioned with Jeanette a village of LGBT senior housing and services welcoming to all LGBTQ older adults. Now that seems like, quite honestly, a fairly prosaic idea coming from a Jewish woman, that, oh yes, you would take care of your elders, right? And that it would be for everyone in the community. But it was met with a lot of resistance. I felt the time was ready to do this work, but the community itself wasn't ready for this work. And so, being a grassroots kind of person, the first 2 years of Open House, from 1998 to 2000, was really going out into the community, giving talks at people's homes, going to LGBT organizations, and asking them, what do you think about getting old? Who's going to take care of you? I just started to raise the issue of aging. And we spread out. We were a small group. I'll tell you who the founding board was. It was Jeanette and I, my dear friend Jan Faulkner, who was a therapist. Jeanette was a therapist. Mathilde Rothschild was a therapist. So, Andrew, it was Warren Vinek, who had worked for Greyhound as a manager, and his partner, who was very involved in Prime Timers, which was an organization for LGBT older men, and as well as for various gay male organizations. And both him and Arthur was his name, and Arthur and Mathilde had tried previously separately to build senior housing. And they were at least 10 years older than me at the time, maybe 10 or 15 years. And they hadn't been successful, but I knew that they had given it a really good shot. And so I had them come to my office, my therapy office, and it was this group of us, and we all knew the same thing, that the community wasn't ready. And so this was from the bottom up. We didn't know anybody, really. We didn't know developers. We didn't know philanthropists. We didn't know moneyed people. But we knew we could do this. And our first event was in 2001, and somebody said to me, I was standing in a room, going to get up and speak, and someone said, Al Baum just walked in. Well, you know, Al's reputation was he was an important philanthropist in the community. And I don't even know how he heard about us. And so I went up to him, and I said, oh, Al Baum, I'm so nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you. And I talked to him, and we started to talk, and it turned out we had a lot in common. He was Jewish. He was a therapist. He was actually a mensch. He wasn't who I thought he would be. And I guess he didn't think I was who I thought I would be. And we actually hit it off from the very beginning. And the thing about Al is Al wasn't like any other philanthropist I ever met. He got to know us first, developed a relationship with us, and then he started to get involved. And once he got involved, Al was fully into Openhouse. He became our ambassador at large. He became our major donor, and he eventually became a close friend. Now, when I say he was ambassador at large, Al understood how to make the philanthropic community aware that we existed. He understood how to do that. And so he brought with him, he was truly a rainmaker. But how he did that was because of the way he developed relationships. He didn't want to just give money and disappear. He wanted to be a part of what we were doing. And his background in urban planning and in housing and all that was so, and as a lawyer, he was able to stay with us through every stage that we went through, giving really amazing advice. So I always say, when you drive by Openhouse, which is 2 huge buildings that we've been able to build of affordable housing for seniors, an activity center. The organization serves over 3,000 LGBT seniors throughout the city. When you drive by there, I always say to people, you should be thinking about Al Baum, because Al Baum made that happen. And he didn't want his name on a building. He was always just too humble. But in my heart, his name is on that building. So that's Al Baum. That's my experience of him. And when we got really close, it was after Jeanette died. Jeanette died in January of 2003. And we got even closer then. He kind of looked after me. He'd call me up. He'd say, how are you doing today? You want to go for a walk? And he just was so sweet and warm. And that was the side of Al. He was not only funny and impish, as you could see, had a kind of impish quality. He had a genuine compassion for people. He was a real people person. So I'm really honored. I mean, I'm just proud to be here, to be giving this inaugural presentation and honoring Al's memory. So here I am, talking about my life as an example of being a Jew who was a social advocate. So I hope you'll bear with me. And the first place to start is in Dorchester, Massachusetts. And that's where I grew up. I was in an intergenerational family. We lived with my paternal grandmother, Sarah Adelman, until I was 5 years old. My parents, my grandmother, Aunt Annie, my father's sister, and my older brother and I lived in a 3-bedroom flat on Callender Street. I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born. My grandmother was the keeper of traditions and the guiding force of ensuring the safety and well-being of the children in the family. She was ever present. My memories of growing up in her apartment were of all these rituals, these Jewish rituals of the Sabbath candles and celebrating holidays like Purim and Passover. And we always had to have at least 6 hours to do the Passover service, which drove everybody crazy. But my grandmother insisted on it. She was an Orthodox Jew, and she came from Odessa. So today, I'm wearing these colors, and I want us to think for a second about the courageous people of the Ukraine who are defending their country and hold them in our hearts. My grandmother came from Odessa when she was 13 years old, and she brought over her little brother Saul, who was 9, and she came alone. Her family said, you need to take your brother to the United States, to the States, so that he'll be safe from the Tsar being conscripted into the Tsar's army or even murdered. Can you imagine a 13-year-old girl on her own traveling that far with her younger brother? I can't. I can't imagine the courage. And that was a defining journey for my grandmother. As she would say in Yiddish, and I have to translate because, I have to say. So my grandmother spoke Yiddish. So of course, my parents, who were wanting to be assimilated, didn't want me to learn English, didn't want me to speak English. And so in a way, I managed to, I had these political instincts early on, you might say. So my grandmother would talk to me in Yiddish, and I would speak to her in English. It was a compromise. And so some of the ways we communicated was more visceral, if you will, more physical even, because of the communication. And but mostly what I can tell you from these long conversations, sitting in the kitchen with her for hours while she baked, and talking to her and looking out in the backyard, was about her thoughts about life and what was important and what mattered. And what she was imparting to me was not the importance of Jewish tradition and of the values that we held most dear. My grandmother's daughter, my Aunt Annie, was developmentally delayed. And we lived with her, as I said, for the first 5 years in her apartment. So I knew my Aunt Annie really well. And at some point, there was talk in the family about maybe sending her away somewhere. And my grandmother said, no, we can't have that. She'll stay here and live a normal life. And my dad and his brother both were young children, were trying to start their own lives, and were concerned about having to take care of my aunt for the rest of her life. And there wasn't a lot of money. But to my grandmother, what was important was that she stay in the family and that we take care of her. And so the brothers came around and accepted that in good faith. And my grandmother arranged for my aunt to go to a program, some Jewish program for developmentally delayed adults. And she would go, and she would be there all day, and she was thrilled. She was having a life for the first time. She was getting out and around. And the brothers could see that, and they really came around. So she was always teaching us and teaching her sons how to live life and how to be with people. At one point, actually, my aunt came home and said she had fallen in love with Stanley. Stanley was a boy in this group for developmentally disabled adults. And my grandmother said, "That's wonderful. You'll get married." And so there was a wedding. And I was the cake girl. I rolled the cake out. And all the friends from the group, the support group that my aunt was in, was at the wedding. And they got along great for a while, and then my aunt got pregnant. And unfortunately, Stanley became kind of jealous and couldn't deal with the baby, and so they had to separate. So my grandmother took my aunt and my aunt's daughter, Sandy, into her home. And they stayed there together until my grandmother passed. And then when my grandmother passed, my father realized that he had to do something, and so he took my cousin Sandy in, and we adopted her. And she became our sister. And my aunt, my dad found a place near our home, which was a Jewish home for elders, and it was and got her a room there. And because she loved to be engaged with people, he got her a job. It wasn't a real job, being the elevator person who pressed the button. And so the seniors would come in, and she'd say, "What floor?" And they'd say, "3, please," and she would press the button. And then he got her a uniform, and she was really thrilled. And so she was happy there. She missed Sandy, but she had a life. And that's what my grandmother always said. She has to have a life. So my sister Sandy grew up, got married, has children, and then grandchildren. Oh yeah, but I'm really dry. Thank you. I don't have a cup. It's over there. Thank you. This is what you get for talking more than 5 minutes. Thank you. That's so good. So my sister Sandy got married, had children and grandchildren. And so we were blessed many times over in many different ways because of the values that my grandmother imparted to us. In fact, I wouldn't even be here if she hadn't had the courage at 13 to come alone with her youngest brother. She was my hero. So after my sister Beth was born, we moved to a 2-bedroom, 4th floor walk-up apartment on Harvard Street, which was near Franklin Park, and because we needed to have our own place with 3 kids. And my father received assistance to eventually buy his own home, in our own first home in Natick, Massachusetts, and we moved out there. But before we moved out to Natick, maybe I should tell you a little bit about Dorchester. So Dorchester was a Jewish neighborhood, and there was Hebrew on the signs, and everybody spoke Yiddish or Hebrew, and it was a safe, comfortable, cozy little community. And on the weekends, people went to the park and sat in the park, and you felt safe and a part of something much larger than yourself. And so here we were moving to Natick, and because my parents couldn't afford to move to some of the Jewish neighborhoods further out in the suburbs, we were moving to a tract where everybody there was different. There was Russians and Greek people and Italians and Irish and Jewish in this one neighborhood. And so my mother went to a B'nai B'rith meeting or something and got a book, a children's book, to bring back to read to us, and showed us pictures about what it was like to live in a multicultural society. And I still can remember to this day, there were pictures of mosques and churches and synagogues, and the whole book was about learning to understand the differences in people and appreciating the humanity that we all experienced. And that was the kind of lesson that they didn't think was in any way unusual. It just came naturally. And I think really it came from the Jewish traditions of caring about other people and taking care of other people and seeing other people as people. So when I was 16, I realized I was a lesbian. And now 16 and realizing you're a lesbian now, it's hard. But 16 and realizing you're a lesbian in 1962 was something else entirely. There was no rights. We had no rights whatsoever. And I think as the rabbi was saying, we were perceived, especially by the Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, as morally deficient, sociopathic even, and criminal. And if you went to the library to read about homosexuality in Boston and in Massachusetts, you'd have to be of a certain age to read those books, and you'd have to sign your name to get them. Well, of course, I wasn't going to do that. So it was very hard to understand that I could be those things, because I knew myself not to be those things. And I struggled with that for the longest time. And I finally decided that I would tell my father. Actually, the truth is, he asked me. He said, "You seem to be struggling with something. I don't know what it is, but I want to help you." And my dad was a problem solver and a very compassionate man. And so I told him, I don't know what I thought he was going to do. You know, I wasn't thinking. I was a kid. But, you know, what was he going to do? And, of course, he sat there as stunned. And then a long silence, and he said, "I'm going to figure out how to help you. I don't know, but I'll figure it out." I said, "Okay." He said, "But don't tell anyone else. Don't tell the rest of the family. We'll figure this out." So I said, "Okay." A couple weeks go by, and he comes back to me, and he says, "I found you a therapist." And I thought, oh, shit. Now I'm in trouble. Because I don't know if he knew what even I knew, how therapists and psychology viewed homosexuals and lesbians. And I thought, what if this therapist diagnoses me? What will happen to me? What would happen to my family? They'd be devastated that would happen. And I thought, okay, I got this. I'll take care of this. So I went to see the therapist. Seemed like a nice guy. And after a couple of weeks, he managed to get it, and he said to my father, he said, "It's just a passing phase." Oh my God, I was so relieved. But I knew in my heart, and I knew in my head, and I knew in my body that I was a lesbian. So I knew that I had to leave, and live my own life, and separate from my family, that it was the best thing to do. I just needed to wait for the right time. You know, many years later, many, many years later, I came out to my dad again. And I said to him, you know, Dad, I explained to him what this experience was like for me to see that therapist and to have to figure out how to handle that. And he said to me, it shocked me, and I loved him for it. He said, I knew. He said, as soon as that therapist said that to me, I knew it wasn't right. I knew what you had done. He said it was the right thing at that time. And then he was sitting down, and he hung his head. He hung his head over. And he said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't help you. And I said to him, it's okay. I said, Dad, it's okay. You know why? There wasn't any help. So, fast forward. I'll just throw this in here. When I was growing up in Dorchester, and it was after the war, I was born after the war, and it was after it came out about the Holocaust, about the extent of the Holocaust, and which was a surprise to my parents. They hadn't known that had been happening. They felt terrible that they hadn't done anything about it. And they understood anti-Semitism. My dad had been stationed in the South before the war. He was going to be going overseas to the Pacific. And he experienced a great deal of anti-Semitism in the South and in the Army, actually. And he took up boxing. He became an amateur boxer for a while. And so one day, he came to my brother and he said, when we were little kids, maybe 7, 8, and he said, I'm going to teach you how to box. You need to know how to box. And I said, I just said, me too. So I made a pest of myself. I was always doing that around sports and things. Oh, I'm going to teach you baseball. I said, oh, me too. So we went out to Franklin Park, and he was going to teach us how to box. But then he started to tell us why he was teaching us how to box. He said, there's a lot of people in the world that hate Jews. They hate Jews because they don't know us. It doesn't matter why they hate Jews, but they can become bullies. And you have to defend yourself against bullies. Now, some people think you can change your hair, you can change your name, and you could not be Jewish. You can't not be a target. But he said it's not true. They won't let you not be a Jew. The world won't let you not be a Jew. So, he says, if you're a Jew, and you're a Jew, be a Jew, and learn how to box. So, my dad wasn't able to help me at a certain place and time in my life. But much later in my life, that boxing training message came back to me. If you're going to be a lesbian, and you're a lesbian, be a lesbian and learn how to box. So I went to Suffolk University in Boston, and I lived in Boston. And I became involved in nonviolent civil rights and anti-war demonstrations. And for a time, I was a member of SDS, which was the Students for a Democratic Society. So so I became seasoned in those kinds of social justice movements. And I worked as a waitress at the Jazz Workshop in Boston and got to meet some of the great jazz artists of our time, and most especially got to meet in person and talk to Nina Simone. And I got an earful from Nina Simone about race and racism, because everywhere Nina Simone went, that's what Nina Simone did. And she was a teacher. She was a teacher to me. Everywhere you go, everywhere you say things, I talk about LGBT seniors. I talk about aging. I talk about our community. I can be in a California Commission on Aging. I can be on the board of the Alzheimer's Association. I could be in the drugstore. And I wind up talking about these things. And I got that from Nina Simone. So you don't always get it from your own culture. You can get it from other cultures as well. She was an amazing warrior. And sometimes I think I can be kind of difficult around that. And sometimes people say to me, "You're always bringing up the same thing." I said, "Well, when the same thing changes, I'll stop bringing it up." So I decided to, after I graduated from Suffolk, to go to Europe. I had tried to find a companionship, a lesbian relationship in Boston, but I wasn't comfortable in the bars. I dated a fair amount of guys. Yes, I did. Which only confirmed what I already knew, but. And so I bought a Eurail pass. I don't know if you know what a Eurail pass is. Okay, you do. And I thought, well, I'll go to Europe. And then I bought a gays guide. A gays guide tells you where all the gay bars are all over Europe. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to come out in Europe, fully out. And I did. I went to bars in Copenhagen, in Stockholm, in Amsterdam, Madrid, Paris, Lisbon. And everywhere I went, I met somebody, and yes, went home, and was learning about what it was to be a lesbian. And I learned what it was about, also what it was to be a lesbian in different countries, and the oppression that they were experiencing. But also what I learned, first and foremost, is that we built community, that love and relationship was essential to our lives. I really blossomed on this trip and really understood who we were for the first time, I think. We being LGBT folks. And I met a woman in Amsterdam. She was French. And we fell in love, and I lived with her in Paris for a year. And that was an extraordinary experience as well, because I had a chance to read everything while I was there. And I cleaned houses, and I taught English at Berlitz, and I managed to make it work financially that way. And one of the books I read, because I'm a book person, was Eros and Civilization by Herbert Marcuse. Now I see. And that changed my life. For the first time, I understood in a bigger picture how capitalism and all the different social structures, patriarchal structures, work to enslave people. You get my drift. And so I was politicized now on another level about myself and about my own community in a way I had never been. And so I had to come home. I couldn't live in exile anymore. I had to come home, 5 minutes. So, so where did I decide to come? I was looking through a travel magazine, and I saw a picture of the Bay Bridge, and I saw the blue skies, and I read the temperate weather, and I said, I'm going to San Francisco. And I dropped into San Francisco, smack in the middle of the gay liberation movement. It was perfect timing, and from there on, my life just exploded. I'm going to fast forward because I only have 5 minutes. And I didn't know I would be able to talk this long, Rabbi. I've never talked. This is a lecture. So I had decided when I got here that I wanted to be a therapist, that I wanted to be a psychologist, because I wanted to go into the belly of the beast. I wanted to go into the organizations that had caused the most harm to us. And by going there, I could study research and therapy, and I could provide therapy to other LGBT folks, so they would know from the minute they walked in to see me that it wasn't their lesbianism or their gayness or their being transgender that was the problem. They might have issues, and they would have issues, and we would talk about them, and we would deal with them, but their being LGBTQ was not one of them. And the other reason to do it was to do research that you can't create policy without research. You can't make high-level changes without research. And research up till then on homosexuals, lesbians, I use those terms because in the early days, it was just lesbian and gay. And then it became LGBTQ, so on. And so research became a passion of mine. Data about us, data to free us from how people saw us, data to provide programs that were suited us, that addressed our needs. And I was walking across the campus at San Francisco State University, where I was getting my master's degree in clinical psychology. And there was a newspaper, school newspaper, and there on the cover was Fred Minigro's picture, who was a professor here at the University of San Francisco. And he had gotten an NIMH grant, the first NIMH grant on gay men and aging. And so I ran to the nearest phone. They had phones then, pay phones. And I called him up. I said, are you Fred Minigro? He said, yes, I'm Fred Minigro. I said, well, I'm Marcy Adelman, and I'm a student at San Francisco State, and you're doing an NIMH study on gay men. Why aren't you doing it on lesbians? Why aren't you including lesbians? He said, well, if I knew enough lesbians to be respondents, participants in the study, I would do it. I said, well, if I could arrange for you to have the number of lesbian elders that you needed for your study, would you do it? And he said, when can you come over? And there I was working with Fred, who was the most generous, gentle, gracious person, one of the most gracious persons I've ever met. And it was a struggle to do this study. It was the 70s, and it was still a struggle to do the 70s. He actually had attempted to do it here at USF, but they didn't want him to do it here. That's why a professor at USF was doing it at San Francisco State. And it's so full circle. I was just telling the president, Paul Fitzpatrick, right? Paul, where are you? There you are. About that Fred was my mentor. And here I am, mentioning his name, honoring him, and being honored to be here, and how times have changed. And I'm so grateful for that. So I know I have to get to some other things. Just very quickly. So one thing I skipped over was, why did I call Fred? I'll tell you why I called Fred. So in the 70s, during the movement, it was like so exciting. For the first time, we were out and about on the streets, in the Castro, holding hands. Couples were kissing. The energy was amazing. We were liberated. And one day, one weekend, I was standing in line for a matinee at the Castro Theater. And everybody was just beautiful. It was a beautiful sunny day. They were all in their 20s and 30s. And I looked around and I thought, well, wait a minute. Where are the old people? Where are our seniors? Why aren't they with us? What happened to them? I didn't know it then, but that was an epiphany. Actually, it was a calling. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with it at all. I just set it aside for a moment. But it was powerful. It shook me. It shook me physically, really. It shook me to my very roots. Where were they? Why weren't they with us? And so fast forward again. That's why when I saw Fred's picture and his story in the newspaper, I jumped on it. And that was probably several months after I had had that experience. I didn't know then that I would spend the next 50 years, really, being an advocate for LGBT seniors and being, so I wanted to share that moment with you. How much time do we have now? Nothing?
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. I should fast forward to quickly say, so I was involved in a lot of establishments of whatever aging services happened here in the city. The research that Fred and I did was actually useful in getting funding for the Gay and Lesbian Outreach to Elder program here, and that was the first elder program in the community. You can see how important data is for getting funding and policy. And then I went on to do several books, but perhaps the most important, other things, but perhaps the most important thing is the founding of Open House. And I was, at the time, busy with my practice, and many of my clients were coming in, and many of my friends were calling me about this was during the dot-com demise, and our seniors, all seniors were being forced out of the city because rents were being raised and people were being evicted. But when LGBT seniors were being forced out of the city, they didn't have a place to go. They didn't have a safe place to go. This was their home. This was the community they built. And other people would say to me, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do when we get old? Now, this was the first time I had seen that kind of movement from the community to talk about aging, and that was because of the AIDS epidemic. It's really hard to talk about aging and living long when the people around you are dying. So for a long time, aging took a back seat. So it seemed to me that there was a need, and the need was now, and people were ready for it. But they still needed a lot. We still needed to do a lot of work in the community. So that was the impetus for starting Open House at the time we started it. And the city didn't think we needed it. I went to the city, and I won't mention names, and someone who had a position to have been most helpful said, why are you coming here for affordable housing money? You're all wealthy and rich and white and you're male. You know, why ask us for money? Here we were, two women sitting there asking her for money, and she was saying we were all, you know, rich and male. So I said, well, that's just not true. And then I realized that we had to do a study in order to change people's minds. And so that's what we did. We did the largest, most racially inclusive study on LGBT older folks ever done at that time in this country. And we did that for Open House. And by the way, the board did that, and I did that, and we all did that. And we did it mostly by paying for it ourselves. That's what a grassroots organization does. And that study opened so many doors. And I'm ever grateful to all the people that helped us do that. There were just hundreds of people who went out with clipboards and went up to people in the Castro and said, you have to fill this out. They were like a little army. And, but we did it. We had something like 1,400 participants filled out that survey. Unbelievable. This was in 2003. And then, of course, I went to see Pam David. She was at the Community Development, Office of Community Development, and she was enormously helpful. Art Agnos, but most importantly, and he's sitting right here, is the wonderful, amazing Mark Leno. And Mark was he was a supervisor at the time, and he was going up to the assembly. And we went to see him, and he understood it right away. And, you know, I think it was clear to people, and it was clear to Mark, that we weren't fooling around, that we were the real deal, and we were going to work till we saw it done. And before he left, I hope I can tell this story, because it's quite an extraordinary story. Before he left to go up to the assembly, he brought us into the basement of City Hall, and he had the people from every important related office in City Hall was there. Do you remember that? And he introduced us. And he said, I want you to meet Marcy and Jeanette, because they're doing something special and they're going to need your help. And they went, and then we spoke, and they went around the room and introduced themselves. And then this is the genius of Mark Leno, and he's done this for 1 million other organizations in our community. I mean, I get goosebumps about what Mark has done. And he opened the doors. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 and 5 and 6. And so thank you, Mark, once more. You are just the most amazing. So that's it, right. Okay, well, thank you. Sorry. No, I'm okay.
So your student Nayeli has the first question to ask you.
Hi, Nayeli.
Hi, Marcy. First, I wanted to thank you so much for coming today. I had the honor and pleasure of working with Marcy in Rabbi Camille's class last year. And this was just a little bit, thank you. And this is just a little bit of all the amazing and selfless acts that Marcy has done for the community. I wish we had more time for you all to be able to hear more of amazing Marcy stories. And on behalf of Andrea and Kaylin, I wanted to thank you so much for being our mentor and our friend. We've learned so much from you, and you are the most selfless and humble and courageous person we have ever met.
Oh my goodness.
And a question I had for Marcy is, we didn't get to talk about it, but I was wondering if maybe you could talk about your engagement with the elder LGBTQ community during COVID.
Sure. Do I need to stand by this? I do. Thank you, hon. That was very sweet. So during COVID, a group of advocates got together, LGBT advocates, to figure out what our community might need in this emergency. It was at the beginning of shelter in place. There had actually been an LGBT task force that had existed here in the city from 2012 to 2014 that I had been on, and it was this group that kind of got back together. Daniel Redmond, who's a lawyer here in the city, and he brought us together. And we couldn't do a needs assessment to figure it out. We didn't have time. So we called in the executive directors of various LGBT senior serving organizations and asked them what was happening. And I tell you, I cried. In 2 weeks, these amazing providers, you know, we have amazing organizations and providers in the city. They had to go from in-person services to virtual. And a lot of the services for our seniors are social services. And all of a sudden, people weren't able to get together, have meals together, and so many of our folks live alone. So, and people were scared. They didn't know how they were going to get groceries, medication. And so I've worked with these executive directors for many years in many different capacities, and I knew they were shaken. But they did an amazing job. But what happened is, and it happened everywhere, it wasn't just our community, people were scared and anxious, and they started to get depressed. They started to have challenges, and challenges that were beyond the expertise of these providers, because they didn't provide mental health services. So I thought, okay, well, how can we quickly do this? So I did 2 things. I started a survey, an online survey with a group of friends, group of advocates, and we got it up and running so we would have data so we could get money. I did that, and at the same time, I got a group of people together to do a telehealth, mental health counseling program for LGBT seniors. And I was, and I went around to see where to place this program. And this was like an emergency. But you know, I knew it wasn't going to happen the next day. But everybody felt the emergency. And we found a home at Curry Senior Services in the Tenderloin. They already had some teleservices, mental health services. So they had an infrastructure to support this program. So then we ran out. We did this all in like 12 months. So then we ran out and got funding for someone to help us write it up. Went to Curry. Curry said yes. Got the buy-in, all that. And so the result is, long story short, the survey showed that there was a high level of anxiety, depression, but most importantly, there's a tremendous amount of trauma, history of trauma in our community from years of discrimination, like I was just telling you about, especially for trans folks and LGBT people of color. And it was astounding even to me. It was 40% of the people in the study. There were 500 people in the survey, and 40% of the cisgender folks had symptoms of trauma, PTSD, and that had escalated during this period. And it went up to 60% for Black, Indigenous, Latinx people of color. So the services were needed immediately if we could do it. And then we went to the City Hall, which we timed all this with the budget process, of course, and we got money from the mayor's office. And so this program will start, unfortunately it hasn't started yet, but it will probably start in the next 6 months, and there will finally be more services for LGBT seniors, and they're free.
So we did get several questions, but unfortunately we have time for just one. And it's this: as difficult as this is to answer, if you could express one message or one lesson to young queer folk everywhere, what would it be? Thank you.
Oh yeah, I can do that. You know, when I was growing up and I was your age, I had no rights. I had no help. My family had no help. But we got through it, and we got through it together as a community. And times are hard right now. There's all these bills that are anti-trans. Trans people, trans children are under attack, folks. This is not a time to give up. It is not a time to stop advocating. And so I would say to you, I'm positive about this. We survived. We survived through hell, really, quite honestly, and we came out strong. We came out really strong and loving. Look at us now. And all the progress we've made. And if they try to roll it back, they'll try to roll it back, but we're not going to let them. And the way we don't let them is by never giving up and by learning how to box.
So we're going to end as close to on time as this rabbi can. I want to invite our lead donors to come up and just say a few words. And thank you so much, Marcy. Here, you take a seat.
I think we just want to thank you for coming. We want to thank Marcy for being Marcy and decades of work. We want to thank Al for being who he was when he was here with us and still being an inspiration and still being with us. And everybody who contributed to make this a lasting program, we thank you. And everybody who heard what got said today. And I hope that folks who weren't at the reception are able to hear the videos of the speakers at the reception. But for Robert and me, this was really a work of love. You know, Rabbi Camille, again, you're an inspiration. I may be your mentor, but you're my hero. And that's how the world should be.
I just want to say what you said, Marcy. You epitomize helping others. That's you. You devoted your life to helping others. And you're changing so many lives. Thank you, honey. Camille, you've been a godsend for us. I know for Pam, for me, for Al, for Cher.
For sure.
And thank you, USF. Really, honestly, I'm so looking forward to this program succeeding. And it's super important that you all check out Outwards, because Outwards is chronicling our community's seniors. They're recording their history. And if you get a chance, go to their website, listen to some of the stories. They're absolutely beautiful, inspiring, heartwarming, and putting our history down for generations. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks so much. I still have this image of Al and Cole dancing.
Thank you and good evening.